Welcome to the launch workshop of the New South Wales Space Research Network. My name is Stephen Williams and I'm one of the co-directors of this network, which is co-hosted by the University of Sydney and UTS and funded by the New South Wales State Government, designed to foster collaboration between universities and industry working in the space sector. Today we're going to review some of the funding programs of the network and provide an opportunity to hear from industry practitioners on some of the grand challenges that are facing this sector. I would like to begin today by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. I also extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today and to the tradition of astronomical observations that have underpinned these cultures for millennia. I'd like to start by playing a video produced by the Australian Space Agency, which acknowledges the important contributions of our Aboriginal peoples and how those have contributed to the Space Agency's logo. So I'd certainly like to acknowledge the Australian Space Agency and the importance they're playing in helping to shape the space agenda in Australia. And I think I remember the first time I saw this, it really left an impression, of the acknowledgement of the importance of Indigenous peoples to Australia and to the space sector. So today's agenda, we've just done a little welcome and introduction. We're going to give an overview of the Space Research Network activities, talk about the structure of the network, some of its objectives, how we're going to be responding to both New South Wales and federal government priorities in space. We'll talk, and then I hope to have a bit of discussion and really open it up for some questions and some discussion about what we're proposing to do and how we can most effectively support the research community in space here in New South Wales and the ACT. Then, as I said, around 11, we've got a number of representatives from industry, both big international primes, but also some SMEs to give their perspective on grand challenges for them in this sector and to really, I guess, get us to start thinking about how research can support the development of innovation in New South Wales. I think there's a big innovation agenda here, and the government is certainly hoping that will really spur new activities and new developments through this network. And then there's some time for discussion and some wrap up and consideration of next steps. I would like to, open up for questions along the way. If anybody wants to have some discussion, make this a little bit interactive, please put your hand up and we'll answer questions or throw something in the chat if you want to have a bit of a discussion along the way.
And your virtual hand as opposed to your physical hand, because we may not see your physical hand with the number of participants we have today. We can't see it in the space at all times.
Yeah, and it's great to see such a good turnout to this event. So I think the motivation, the objective of the Space Research Network is to position New South Wales enterprise to compete in the space sector, and I think there's a huge amount of opportunity here. There's significant investment from federal government, and with an election looming, it'll be interesting to see whether there's continued backing of this sector, and I think we want to position New South Wales to be squarely in focus for attracting some of that investment. We want to support key stakeholders in industry and government to undertake research and development activities with a real focus on translation and impact. I think if you're doing space research, you really want to see things in orbit, really having impact, or taking the data streams that are being generated and seeing them applied into a variety of areas. If you look through the New South Wales Space Industry Development Strategic Themes, we're really trying to foster and support those by fostering collaboration across industry and with the research community. So really encouraging universities to work with one another and with industry to grow capability. We want to help develop a fit-for-purpose workforce, thinking about higher degree research students and internship opportunities. We want to support the growth of industry precincts and locating the office here in the Central Beverly corridor is consistent with that desire. We want to maximize New South Wales space industry activities in the national space ecosystem. I think there's a huge amount of activities going on in this space, and we really want to help foster that. And of course, eventually, we'd like to see jobs and growth and attracting new investments to the state and more broadly to Australia to support Australia's ambitions in space. We look at the Australian Civil Space Strategy capability priorities. We have excellent capabilities in New South Wales and the ACT in all of these capability priorities in PNT, Earth observation, communication, space situational awareness, robotics and automation, and access to space. And we really want to be positioning, providing support and funding to support people's work in these areas. We plan to develop a comprehensive capabilities and infrastructure map of New South Wales. So we really want to showcase the activities that are happening across the state, make sure those are visible, bring them together in one place, have pointers out to all the excellent activities that are happening in research organizations and industry across the state. We want to help address the common challenge of taking early stage research work out into the workforce and facilitate new industry opportunities. And I think our activities that we're going to talk about today are really designed to directly target this by curating connections between individual organizations, motivating and seeding initiatives through funding programs, and I think hoping to capitalize on our position of influence to facilitate larger scale initiatives. And we've already been invited to be part of the steering committee for the SmartSat CRC. We've been engaged in a variety of different initiatives in the space sector, and I think it's really great to be able to sort of speak for and represent the excellent work that's being done in research in New South Wales and the ACT. As I said, we've proposed to align the network with the government's state-sponsored Tech Central Precinct, and we're currently in Cicada Innovations, and the National Space Industry Hub will be hosting the offices of the Space Research Network. This is in close proximity to both UTS and University of Sydney, so it makes sense from a geographic perspective. But I think it's also emerging as a bit of a hub and a focus for space activities. So we've got the New South Wales Space Research Network node based here. We've got this space industry hub. And we're hoping to have some pretty printing facilities and maker spaces and things emerging here. Lots of tech startups. So I think it's a great place for us to be thinking about the future of space. And then we've also been engaged with the Western Parkland City Authority and discussions around Aerotropolis and the importance of situating really bespoke and signature infrastructure at the Aerotropolis. And I think space could certainly benefit from that, from some of those developments. So both Rob and I are involved in some of those discussions, and really excited to represent the space sector there. We have a number of university partners that we're in discussion with, and so far, all the feedback has been very positive. We're modeling the partnership model on the New South Wales Defence Innovation Network, so the sort of terms of membership and things like that are quite familiar, making it relatively easy to get the partnerships negotiated. We anticipate having industry partners not formally, making a financial contribution to be members of the network, but making contributions through project funding to leverage research investment. So I think that's the sort of model that we're going with, and as I said, a lot of this has been based on the quite successful DIN model. And of course, we also want to partner with the Australian Space Agency, SmartSat CRC, Space Industry Hub, CSIRO, and the Western Parkland City Authority. So I think there's already a huge amount of activity going on in the state, and we're very keen continue supporting that growth. I want to talk a little bit about the network activities, some of the funding opportunities, and those are now available on the website with guidelines and application forms available. So our research pilot project scheme is really designed to understand industry capabilities and needs in alignment with Australia's space priorities. So the Australian Civil Space Strategy identifies those priorities, and we'd really like to align these research pilot projects behind the national priorities. We'd like some of these projects to be in response to an existing industry problem or an unmet space capability need. We will be providing funding to support collaboration between universities. So at least 2 SRN partner organizations will need to be involved in these research pilot projects. And we're earmarking in this first round of funding up to 150K per project over a period of up to 12 months. So really starting to get some activities started and sort of fund new initiatives. We'd like at least one of these to be focused on advanced manufacturing, which is consistent with the federal and New South Wales government priorities for space and advanced manufacturing. I think there's loads of opportunities through a number of partner organizations setting up, partner universities in particular, setting up new advanced manufacturing capabilities. And I think there's great potential to marry industry needs with some of those facilities. And we hope that these pilot projects will form the basis for future funding submissions to the Australian Space Agency, the Australian Research Council, SmartSat CRC, and other funding opportunities. So I think there's a huge amount of potential here. We've had the announcement of the Trailblazer Lunar Rover program being administered by the Space Agency. SmartSat CRC is continuing to look for project proposals, and they're starting to scale up the size of the activities that they're funding. And I think we really want to help position research and potentially industry partners to compete for that kind of funding. Application timelines, we're looking at we're announcing this today, and we've earmarked a 2-month period for applications to be due. We're hoping for about a 1-month turnaround on the technical reviews and announcing the results towards the end of March, with an anticipation that April, May will be spent finalizing contracts and funding flowing by June of next year. And there's a link there to our website with access to the guidelines and proposals. And we can look at some of that a little bit later if people are interested in, but that's available now online. In complementing those research pilot projects, we're also looking at seed projects, which are industry-led. So we want these to be a key catalyst for collaboration between space industry SMEs and larger organizations and academia by providing seed funding to do early stage proof of concept projects. So we'd like these network funds to prime projects that have potential to lead to innovations and solutions suited to leveraging that further R&D funding to really encourage collaboration, technology transfer, commercialization opportunities. We're looking at projects with a total value of again, about 150,000. We'll be providing 50% of that funding in cash from the network. And we're expecting matched funding with SMEs able to buy into the program with a 25% co-funding of cash and matching cash from larger entities. And we've taken a lead from the DIN on the definition of SMEs, so organizations with up to 200 employees. Again, we're having a parallel timeline for applications due in early Feb. So we've got a couple of months to kind of develop those relationships, both partnerships with industry, and the guidelines and application forms are now available online. I might pause there actually and see if anybody wants to ask any questions about those 2 programs before we move on to some of the other programs that we're going to be running. So in the interest of this not being just a monologue on my part. No questions? All clear?
We may pause just to make sure that we don't have anybody sitting in the waiting room
Yeah,
unadmitted.
okay. All right. I think another important part of the New South Wales investment strategy in this area is to really think about the future workforce. And we think that PhD students and even some of our senior undergraduate students and master's students are going to form the basis of our future highly skilled workforce that's going to be required to meet Australian space sector needs. Didn't pause on, I didn't mention it, but on the way through, but we're also thinking about the importance of including TAFE and you know, having trades that are trained up to really deliver value for the space sector. And I think we'd like to see proposals coming through that address that need as well. But the member universities are making a commitment to HDR stipend funding. So as part of the commitment to become part of the network, the partner universities will be committing stipend funding. We're also looking to establish a space industry internship program within the space sector. So really looking to provide opportunities for PhD students to go out into industry, to work for 3 to 6 months, to really understand the problems of industry and bring those back to their research. And I think that's a very effective way of providing links between industry and researchers through those very talented and enthusiastic students. So I'll put up in the next slide some details of how to propose to give us an expression of interest for industries wishing to host internship programs. We'll advertise that to students and then go through some interviews and see to place students. We also, both Rob and I have been developing strong collaborations with NASA, JPL, the German Space Agency, JAXA, and actually having both senior undergraduate students and PhD students embedded at the space agencies. So part of the network funds will also go to providing opportunities for students to spend time overseas with some of those partners, and we're already in discussion with a number of space agencies. We'd like to leverage the well-established programs of internships at both senior undergraduate, master's, and HDR level. And one of the assessment criteria for our seed funding and research pilot projects will be looking to have direct student industry contact as an assessment criteria. So having internships that are related to projects will be seen as a positive point of view of the assessment panel. The stipends will be available for 3 to 6 months, and you know, times in between that. We're calling for the first round of project proposals from industry to host students. Again, looking at that sort of 2-month period to get those project EOIs in. We'll be advertising those to students and looking to run interviews and solicit applications from students in direct response to particular project opportunities in March, and hoping to get students out into industry from the April timeframe. We're conducting interviews with interested students and their industry sponsors, and we'll have the availability for students to start on a rolling basis following the interviews. And we've put the expression of interest form now available online through our website. I've seen the chat about pasting these into the chat. Unfortunately, I'm sharing my screen, so I'm not able to do that as we go. But
someone has graciously put the link.
So maybe I don't know if we're able to paste all 3 opportunities, both the seed funding, the research pilot projects, and the HDR internship links. That'd be great.
And they're all linked from the same website. So
yeah, if you just go to the head website, you should be able to find all those pretty readily. I think the other important thing from a space perspective is opportunities for networking and outreach. And what I'd really like to see us do is to foster a sense of community in the research space, a community that includes research and industry and HDR students. And so we'll be starting a regular technical session of technical seminars and workshops, inviting students and researchers and industry to visit the various sites at universities where research is being done, and also potentially going out to industry partners and seeing the facilities and talking with talking about some of the challenges that they're experiencing, really introducing all of the activities that are happening across the across the state. And I think, you know, reading groups and things like that are a good way of fostering a sense of a cohort for those PhD students. We've also been talking with some of the university partners about the prospect of doing a joint master's program, actually setting up a program where students can enroll in courses at the partner institutions, and there are similar programs in place. I know in the marine science space, there's a similar sort of program already in place, and we'd like to draw inspiration from that. Really, to develop, I guess, Sydney as a destination for students wanting to come and you know, whether it's at the undergraduate level, masters, or into PhDs, and really establish Sydney and New South Wales as a destination of choice. You know, a lot of people are very interested in space. We've had a lot of success in working with the Powerhouse Museum on a Mars yard that was, you know, used by students dialing in remotely, learning about space. We've hosted the Zero Robotics competition that allowed students to program robots on the space station, and at least at Sydney, our rocketry team has been very successful in the Spaceport America Cup, and I think there's a huge amount of enthusiasm for all things space, and this, you know, outreach and engagement is certainly a big part of what we want to be able to support and to announce, you know, any activities that people are involved with. We'd also like to fund some short courses to connect industry partners and researchers focused on key research and development programs. So the areas of focus may include small satellite systems. We ran a small satellite systems short course a couple of years ago in collaboration with Surrey Satellite Technology Limited, and that was very well attended. I believe there's a program on actually this afternoon looking at space mining, and maybe we can get Andrew Dempster to say a few things about that. You know, NSW is hosting that. There's always lots of activities, but we'd like to fund some of those opportunities and that sort of those short courses, and really to engage industry and showcase the work that's going on. And of course, we'd like to help promote all the wonderful activities that are happening across the state through news and media. And we've got our website up and running, and we'd like to add an events page, which is something we're working on. One of the networking initiatives that we're going to be announcing in early 2022 will be some travel bursaries to support and encourage New South Wales and ACT-based PhD students and academic staff to deliver talks and build international networks. I think as the world starts to emerge from the COVID pandemic, really getting back out to the major international conferences, showcasing the activities that are happening in Australia and in particular New South Wales is something we'd like to support. So we're looking at providing up to 10 bursaries of $2,500 to be available to attend major international conferences or symposia, with the expectation that there'll be some matching funding provided by the host institutions. We haven't opened that up yet. We're still working through the sort of regulations and application process, but we'll be announcing that in early 2022. In terms of governance, the network will be governed by a board that will include the chair, and we've proposed the government Michael Clark, who we'll be hearing from very shortly, from TELUS as the inaugural SRN chair. We've got representatives from the New South Wales government committed to be on the board. We'll be asking the Australian Space Agency to be part of it as we stand up the board, and all the governance paperwork is being generated as we speak. Rob and I will be representing the executive of the network, and we'll also have representatives from the founding university members and from industry. We'll have some operational support provided by an operations manager, BDM, and a project administrator, but we're trying to keep the overheads of running the network to, you know, pretty lean, and to really put the money that the government has provided into the research support activities. So I think that's an important part of the program. We've laid out a bit of a vision for the first couple of years of the network. So really we're sort of in the 6 months in since the things have been signed off, really getting things established, getting all the memberships confirmed. We've got the paperwork out with the various university partners. We're starting to soft launch some of the funding programs, and really we're looking to grow this network over the next 6 to 12 months. But we anticipate that in a similar model to the other NSW funded networks, the DIN, the Smart Sensing Network, that this will be a long-term program that will continue to deliver value for the state and research and industry and the government for many years to come. So we're very pleased to be getting this underway. Looking forward to working with you all in this space going forward. And I'm going to pause there. We're running a little ahead of schedule, so we've got lots of time for discussion. If anybody has any questions, comments, feedback, thoughts about what you think priorities should be, happy to take questions now. Okay, so Monica's put a question in the chat about the web portal. I guess I can. Go straight to the website. So we do have a Space Research Network website set up. All right, I'm just trying to get that more sensible. Yeah, so here we describe a little bit the, this at this point, this is sort of just our first go, but describes the objectives of the network. As we confirm membership, we'll be putting links and descriptions to all the members. We've announced the launch workshop. We've provided some tools for signing up for news and events and funding opportunities. So we are building a bit of a distribution list, which we'll be sending announcements around to people. So if you're interested in being on that list, everybody who's signed up for today, we've added to our distribution list. We've got the announcement of the workshop and on the site, and we've also got links to sort of an overview of the network activities, but also details of those funding opportunities are now available. So we've got a description of the various funding schemes, the application process, the assessment, timelines, and guidelines and application forms for those for the funding opportunities. The web portal, what I'd really like to do is to have to solicit input from industry partners to be showcased, industry and university partners to have some of their space activities showcased and linked out through the network. So we really want to have an ability for people to land on a page and sort of really see what the state of research and industry development work is across the state.
And part of the purpose of today's chat is to set the scene, to say that we're interested in your feedback and helping to guide and grow things like this web portal in a way that's most useful to people. So we're asking for your feedback now, but that's not the only time. We're always happy to have suggestions. We did have a couple questions in the chat.
Yeah, so Tim and Joanna from Optus have asked, is there much focus on software, research, products, etc.? It seems very mech heavy. I think absolutely we want to support a broad range of activities related to space. So there's no suggestion that it will be all mech. Downstream processing of remote sensing data, for example, space related. We're thinking about space not just in a narrow context of satellites or robotics or remote sensing or deep space. We'd really like to support a broad range of activities related to space and the downstream impacts that a lot of that work is going to have on our society in things like agriculture, water monitoring, and all those things. And I think we'll increasingly rely on software tools, software development. Machine learning has been a huge part of a lot of research activities over the last few years, and I think we would certainly be willing to support development activities, research and development activities in that area as well. Rob, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I just add that I think, if you want to think about what the focus is, it's really a digital focus, both in digital control, mechanical systems, software systems as well. So that's, I think, a better way to characterize it is digital flavor.
Yeah. And the space agency's been setting out their roadmaps for remote sensing, for foundation services through their robotics roadmap. I think we'll be looking to those roadmaps to help guide prioritization of activities. So I recommend having a look at those. I think they set out a pretty clear mandate for future funding from the federal government. And I think what we're trying to do is really position New South Wales research and industry to be competitive in those opportunities. So I think that's going to be something we want to support and focus on.
A few more questions coming through in the chat.
So Carrio's asked, are the HDR top-ups, internships, and travel bursaries limited to domestic HDR students or open for international HDR students as well? I think that'll be largely up to the partner universities to determine. The commitment is for stipends. I think 2 stipends along with the membership fees is what the commitment is. That's similar to a DIN model. I know at Sydney, if we're funding HDR stipends, or if we bring in funding for HDR stipends, those will be matched with a waiver of international fees. So I think we're going to have to leave it up to the individual universities and the commitment to whether they're supporting a full international scholarship, just a stipend, national fees. But the commitment is for 2 stipends at a minimum. Yes. And we would expect that a lot of the students interested in studying in space are some of the top students coming through our programs, and I think we'll be very competitive to attract R2P, both domestic and international students. So I would certainly hope that we can grow a strong cohort of students. Also has to be said that the SmartSat CRC is still looking to fill something on the order of 40 additional PhD stipend opportunities. So, we would certainly be encouraging our partners to be reaching out to SmartSat CRC, putting forward proposals for new HDR stipend opportunities, and to leverage that funding opportunity as well.
A few more questions coming through in the chat, but I'd also encourage people to feel free to ask questions live. We'd like to hear your voices and see your faces, so don't be shy to raise your digital hand.
So Phil has said, nice to hear the remote sensing activity is welcomed. And what about activities in object detection and recognition in space? I know there's certainly a lot of work going on in situational awareness, in debris field tracking, and I think a lot of that will continue to be a focus for both research and industry, and we'd certainly welcome applications focused in that area as well. There's a huge amount of potential in developing new tools that will support innovation in that sector.
I think we've caught up with the chat. If we've missed you, please let us know.
Okay. All right, we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, but I'm assuming that we're okay to proceed straight through to the industry perspectives. So I think our first speaker is Michael Clark, and I'm just going to make sure Michael's with us.
And so while we're doing that, I might say a few words about why we decided to start off with a few of these grand challenge talks. And what we'd like to do is really emphasize from the start that we're all interested in activities with impact, with looking at the real problems that will need to be solved in order to achieve the impact we want to have, difficult problems, and we'd like to focus that through the eyes of some visionaries, some people who we think can articulate in a powerful way what the big questions are that are most prominent. And that's the reason why we've organized a number of short talks today to really set the scene and orientation in that direction.
I think identifying those key grand challenges, the big things that are keeping people awake at night, and thinking about how research activity across the sector can support and address those issues, I think is going to drive a lot of our thinking in the programs.
Stefan,
So Michael,
Stefan, it's Michael Clark here. I'm online.
Okay, terrific. I'll throw it to you then, if that's okay.
Okay, well, thank you for your introduction. I'm getting a bit of feedback here. I'm going to turn my volume down. There we go. Thank you for the good introduction to the SRN, Stefan. I think that was good for everybody. Stefan's asked me to say a few words about grand challenges in the space sector and those of relevance to Thales. So prepared a few slides here. If you can just click through those, Stefan. Next slide. First off, I just wanted to highlight this active tension that we find in our business in Thales Australia between sovereignty and global solutions. We have a customer in Australia, or the prime customers in Australia for space systems are government and defence for us, and they have an increasing focus on sovereignty. However, their procurement organisations are always interested in value for money, and the easiest way to provide value for money is to leverage existing systems that are developed for a global market. So we've got this ongoing active tension that we need to resolve between the extent to which we offer a fully sovereign solution and the extent to which we leverage that global capability. Our general approach in Australia in the past has been to build local capability through leveraging that global. And that's what we've done in building things like our underwater systems business in Australia and our air traffic management business in Australia. And we're hoping to do the same in the space sector as well. So that's just to highlight the context that we're working in. If you go to the next slide. This is about position, navigation, and timing that all of you are probably very familiar with. The reality is that this is an area where Australia is very dependent on non-sovereign solutions, and those solutions are very costly. If you're looking at a GPS system of 24 MEO satellites, it's a huge cost, and it's beyond the reaches of a middle power like Australia. More recently, people have proposed things like LEO solutions that can offer positioning. But those LEO solutions are inherently global in their nature. When you start putting up LEO satellites, you don't get a good regional coverage, you get a global coverage, in which case you should be selling your capabilities to a global market. And I think a good example of this is the SpaceX Starlink constellation, where clearly they're aiming at a global audience, a global market, in order to be able to justify the level of investment required. So in terms of P&T in Australia, we're left looking at things like augmentation systems, like the SBAS system that we proposed for Geoscience Australia recently. But that is still quite a significant piece of infrastructure, quite a cost. It requires a significant investment, and it's still completely dependent on a foreign constellation in terms of the way it works. Okay, so what we require for the future in Australia in terms of to build sovereign capability in the P&T area is we need robust, resilient, sovereign P&T solutions. And that means solutions that will work in a contested or a denied environment where we've no longer got access to some of those foreign constellations. Now these systems, they may well not deliver the same level of performance, but they're better than having no system at all if you're completely denied access to a foreign-owned system. So that's one area, position, navigation, and timing. If we flick to the next slide, Stefan. Okay, the second area I've chosen to mention is access to space. And access to space, often thought into orbit. This is an area that Thales is really not involved with. Thales specializes in payloads and communication systems, etc. We're not really into launch at all. And my personal impression of the launch market is it's an area where there's two broad approaches. One is you've got to be get it right first time by taking a very highly structured and disciplined approach to your engineering and testing and double testing and triple testing everything, okay? And that ends up expensive. You know, ask NASA, it's expensive. And then there's the sort of the agile entrepreneurial approach. And this is highlighted by organizations like SpaceX, able to tolerate failure, either. And I see examples of both of that. Southern Launch, who I note have pivoted away from their recent foray with a Taiwanese rocket due to repeated failures of being able to get that system to work. So I think that sort of summarizes that launch area and summarizes the sort of the risk context there. And Thales is really not involved in that. However, from my perspective, access to space also means things like space situational awareness and space domain awareness. And these are areas where we are quite active, both in Europe and in Australia. And it's an increasingly important area, as Jason Held will probably tell you in the next speech. Access to space is important, and it's becoming more and more threatened. You know, we've seen a rapid emergence recently of large LEO mega constellations. And we've seen a continued willful increase in debris creation, the latest culprit being Russia, who on the Soviet era, creating thousands more new pieces of debris. Things are the slide seems to have disappeared off my screen. Have other people lost it as well? It's come back. Thank you. Okay. Space
my system
is all about conjunction assessment and mitigating that so that we don't have collisions in space. Space domain awareness is what you'll hear the military people talking about, and that's all about attribution, being able to tell who is doing what in space and being able to take appropriate action with regard to that, which might be political, it might be military, it might take many forms. Okay, so in terms of space situational awareness, space domain awareness, what do we need in terms of research inputs? Where's the innovation, required innovation? Well, what we need is sovereign regional sensor networks throughout Australia. And we're talking about diversified sensor networks. We're talking about RF, optical, radar systems, etc. Fusion, which can be quite difficult given the disparate sensors used. We're talking about some sensors which provide range data, others which don't. Things like ground-based optical sensors, which provide angles-only observations. Fusing that data to be able to use the benefit of a broad sensor network can be quite challenging. And high accuracy orbit determination algorithms. And if you're really adventurous, maybe you want to look at debris removal systems. This is not an area where Thales is very active, although Thales is involved in the development of technologies which allow proximity type operations and docking maneuvers in space. So there's some areas in space domain awareness. If we flick to my last slide, this is about threats from space. Okay, the Outer Space Treaty actually forbids nuclear weapons in space, but that hasn't stopped a number of nations essentially flirting on the edge of those rules. We've seen for decades now ICBMs, which have a capability to enter space, although only on a ballistic trajectory, and therefore are not considered to be in orbit from the perspective of that treaty. Fractional orbital bomb systems. These are systems which do go into a low Earth orbit, but only for a short duration before they deploy their payload or weapon systems, whatever it might be. And just recently, we've seen the Chinese actually testing systems which seem to combine this FOBS idea with hypersonics. So in our current regional tensions environment, I think there's a desire in the Australian defence context to look at how we would defend against such threats. So any research you can do on how to defend against a hypersonic weapon system delivered from an orbital vehicle in LEO would certainly a link there on information about that context. So I've given you just a brief summary there of a few areas where Thales has an interest or an involvement, or maybe some more far-reaching areas where you may want to get more ambitious about your research objectives. Remember, waiting until Defence has a registered program on an activity is a bit late to decide that it's a good time to start doing some research. You really want to get ahead of the curve and invest your research in the upstream ideas so that by the time Defence or government have a procurement activity, that you've already got a capability demonstrated that you can get an industry partner interested in sufficiently to be able to offer a solution. So that's pretty much all I've got. I'm happy to take any questions on any of those ideas if anyone would like to ask questions.
We have some time for a few questions, so if anybody wants to ask Michael any questions, just sing out. Okay, I'll have a look at the chat. Can't see anything on the chat. No, Karu's got his hand up, so we're going to have a live question. Karu.
Well done on the first live question.
Hi, Michael. Nice presentation.
Good to see you.
Fun to listen to you. It is totally non-technical. It's almost totally non-technical, but something we don't have a lot of knowledge in Australia, especially among small universities, small companies, but we have quite lack of knowledge. Maybe this is something SRN can pick up in their education program to find specialists in relevant areas, overseas or national Australian, to give some seminars about what is the current regulations and laws associated with operating in space, so operating on ground, using space, as well as obviously some of these regulations are under review with the new entirely different scenario of many LEOs, CubeSats, etc.
Yes.
So what we could expect in the next 5 to 10 years.
I think that's a very good idea, Karu. I no doubt Stefan's making notes as we talk, and there are a number of ways to go about that. I do know in Australia, there's a consultant by the name of Donna Lawler who is very familiar with space law and helping companies who are establishing contracts to deliver capabilities into space. So she's a good point of contact for that topic. The other thing is the Australian Space Agency also should probably be your first point of call on that area. They are responsible for coordinating Australia's approach to space, and they are in the process of drafting guidelines and regulations themselves to govern things like launch and requirements for satellites to be able to deorbit at the end of their life in order to avoid the debris problem that I've highlighted, etc. So that's a great idea, Karu, and maybe Stefan might like to comment on that.
I can see Andrew Dempster's actually posted Donna's contact details in the chat. So yeah, I think certainly space debris is a big concern, and I think there are already a number of projects underway funded through the Space Agency and various other SmartSat CRC as well, I think. So I think certainly an area that people are going to be concerned about. Thinking about how we responsibly use space and try to minimize the impact and the likelihood of adding to the problem, and thinking about ways to deorbit some of the things that are up there that maybe shouldn't be. Is a good area to be thinking about.
And I think and I agree that increasing general awareness amongst researchers or others who may not be familiar with the general landscape, legal landscape, is worthwhile in itself.
Yeah, so I think we're this network is not just about supporting technical developments. I think areas in law and societal impacts and things like that are also potential for some projects in that area if we can find the right links between universities and industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've let that run on a little bit, but I think it's good to have a bit of discussion. And thanks, Michael, for your insights and for your engagement and involvement with the network. We really look forward to.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
So our next speaker I had on the agenda was Jason, and I see Jason's with us. Jason, do you have some slides you wanted to talk to, or do you want to just?
Yeah, look, I've got 30 slides, but I'm going to show like a quarter of them. Right now, you've got $420 billion market that's tripling by 2030. So it's kind of like the dot-com boom back in 1996. It's kind of what it looks like right now. For Australia, it's pretty exciting because Australia has traditionally been a $4 billion market. As Michael Clark said, there's a little bit of tension between sovereignty and things like this. But it's now an $8 billion market with a lot of purchasing on the table and a lot of interest in the local community building things out. So the context for a lot of people that are trying to start new missions and get into the industry for the first time, it's kind of like you got to learn to knead your own bread every time you want to make a sandwich. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to package all of these different things into a single mission control solution that we call the Responsive Space Operations Center. That mission control center went live. There's some screenshots from some of the software that some of you have seen before. Basically turned space ops into a video game and put machine learning on the back end. So when Tom Hanks says, Houston, we have a problem, instead of 20 people on the ground trying to fit round pegs into square holes, you're diagnosing the health of the satellite in situ with the mission, piping it directly to the operators directly. And especially since a lot of the operators for a lot of these new missions are a little bit younger, they don't have 15 years experience in it. Maybe the satellite pace of the space mission is a bit shorter. That's really, really important. Shortens the training time for the operator, shortens the ease of control of the mission. But also you think in terms of the volume, the massive volume of space objects that you're getting. You got a market that's tripling. So what that means is you've had about 4,000 active satellites in space last year. This year you've got about 7,000. By the end of 2030, the conservative estimates are showing 30 to 40,000 satellites. Aggressive estimates are showing up to 100,000 satellites in low Earth orbit. So there is no agency, there is no single company, there is no single research organization or entity that can handle space traffic and what that future is. Right now, space traffic is being managed by the US military for the most part, and they're tired of it. They said, we want to be space warriors, not space traffic cops. So companies like Sabre are coming in, and we're setting up these mission control centers that look a lot like this. And that's actually the mission control center we set up under the Space Infrastructure Fund program that the Space Agency awarded us. That's the RSOC out in Adelaide. It's kind of like a Sabre Astronautics embassy within the Space Agency at the moment. And you've got your screens which show the space traffic in the local regions. You've got your screens that handle the actual commanding for the spacecraft themselves. And then you've got your mission management boards. In the front row, you've got your analysts. In the back row, you've got your people setting up your commanding. This handsome fella is Tom Riddell. He's the flight director that we selected to run the joint. The interesting thing here is it's all being run off of a very small number of products that have been designed to handle very large numbers of space objects, designed to handle all the different events that can happen in space traffic when you've got a contested environment, and not just contested from a military standpoint. It's also space is becoming crowded and contested from a commercial standpoint. We're seeing commercial entities kind of poke each other in the eye in some very different ways. So if you're thinking in terms of, oh, by the way, we've got 2 labs out in Colorado, one in Boulder and one in Colorado Springs. So we get this follow the sun operations. We operate out of Boulder as well as in Adelaide. And for missions for our customers, anywhere from CubeSat up to 2-ton spacecraft, we go back and forth in running shifts. But I think what's most interesting to you is not the tech as much as it is. I had a roadmap up here. Yeah, there you go. There's the roadmap. So that was the original roadmap we had, and say, okay, where's this really going in the future? Where's the future really look for us in terms of space travel? Well, right now, this tripling of the market is because of the reduced cost of your actual spacecraft manufacturing, the vast increase in the number of actors, and the increased growth. And what you're getting is this growth where you got trillions of dollars in low Earth orbit today, but now we're starting to see missions that are going to the moon. We got 4 customers on board right now that have lunar or cislunar missions that we need to support, right? So our original roadmap that we sent to the space agency saying, all right, by the end of 2022, we'd have a minimal viable product up and running and $500,000 in revenue. We actually hit that within just a few months of opening back in March. We're actually over here, we went live on the 31st of March, and we've got about 6, about bandwidth for maybe 7 if we stretch it, 8 space missions over the next year or two. Doing a lot of work in virtual reality operations, so a little bit of research that you can do in how do you actually optimize a team of people to track and manage large numbers of objects, because you still need a human being in the loop for some of it, and you need automation for others. And then the real question afterwards is, all right, so human economy is going from low Earth orbit out to the moon, and eventually it's going to be going to Mars. Right now, we definitely see the economy going to the moon. How do we actually get human spaceflight involved in this future? And how do we get any Australian that wants to be a part of that future to actually participate? So we signed an agreement with a company called Axiom out of the United States. Axiom, for those of you who don't know, won the NASA contract to take over the International Space Station. And they're building their own modules to replace the space station. And it's going to be gradual over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. And they've got a commercial program where you pay them money, they could fly you as individual astronauts. And I said, well, you could send wealthy people up into space, and eventually you'll run out of wealthy people. What if we put together a program in Australia where we find all these projects and all these research programs that could be flown on the International Space Station, and manufacturing, building products in space, because of the microgravity environment gives certain advantages in material science, certainly in pharmaceuticals, and as well as biotech. And let's actually leverage that and build companies in Australia. So that's really the third leg of this, is a incubator that we set up called the Wolfpack Space Hub, which we are working. It's based out of Sydney. It's spun out of Sabre Astronautics. It's going to use the Mission Control Center, and it's going to use the astronaut program. And it's designed for a research project like yours that not just want to fly out there, but actually want to be commercialized and spun out of the universities. And we see the SRN as a potential kickstart program that we can then take and help mold and shape into real commercial programs outside of academia. So that's a lot. What are your questions?
Good. Thanks, Jason. That's great. Do we have any questions for Jason? It's great to see some of the growth and some of the opportunities coming through with the Space Operations Center. And it's fantastic work, Jason.
All right, all the best.
I believe you're operating out of your Boulder office as we speak.
Well, this is the apartment. It's late at night. I'm in country. I tend to go back and forth, when the restrictions ease up. And I should be back in Australia by the end of the year, a couple of weeks. Those of you who have projects that you need satellite flight support, please call us, because our operations centers right now, there are so many Americans that are buying up our flight slots, and not enough Australians, which is a bit of a challenge for the space agents, because they're the ones who put the bill for this Mission Control Center, at least the one in Australia. And the other one, the astronaut program, is the kind of opportunity that is really a once in a lifetime sort of opportunity. And if you think of where this industry is going, folks, you got about 8 years before we peak in terms of how much money people are spending, in terms of where this growth is going. And every few years I come up on a talk like this, and I tell you, here's kind of what you need to do. And the people who kind of follow that, they make a lot of money and their projects get successful, and you get out there, and that's really what we want to do. And we want to do it together. So I'm putting myself out there as being available, coalition of the willing, anybody who wants to participate can. For some of you who don't want to do manufacturing, but want to be a part of sensors and data and things like that, the Mission Control Center is also very open. And we do live data exercises, 3 times a year that we've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years with the US DoD. Space Force has basically given us the leadership of the entire Pacific region. And I know some of you might be afraid to work with the military, but the military really does need to divest themselves of the civil space traffic, and there is so much work to be done. And there's no single entity that can do it. So we've made it a coalition of the willing. Anybody who wants to play with us and partner with us is we're more than happy to do so.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, everyone.
Just going to reshare my screen.
So while Steph's doing that, next up, we have someone from Airbus, who I believe.
Angelo Villarosa.
Yes.
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Airbus perspective.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you. Over to you.
Hi, good morning. Thanks everyone for the opportunity to speak today, especially Stefan and the team. It's a great, let's say, summary of what's happening and what it is your ambitions are. So that's fantastic to hear. As I said, my name's Angelo. I'm a design engineer here at Airbus Defence and Space in Australia, working locally with the team to expand our space footprint, so to speak. I make the presumption today that you have a little bit of an idea about what we're doing in space, but some of the key areas that I want to focus on today is perhaps less about our technical capabilities, but more about the sort of areas that we are looking for when it comes to research, to innovation, to, let's say, investments into, in this particular forum, the Australian research industry. One of the other areas I'm also going to focus on is how we sit on a global focus. So what that means for Airbus overseas. So we're often, let's say, defined as a European-based company. What I want to say here is that with respect to such a comment, we are also present in North America, South America as well now. And as I said, our role at the moment is locally here in Australia is to expand the collaboration that we have outside of purely defence business. On the next slide, I want to highlight a couple of the key challenges that we've been asked to provide here, just around that are facing the Australian space sector. You'll see here that there's, let's say, these 8 highlighted areas that we have been proposing to the local industry. What we've seen here, and these 8 are, let's say, 8 of the 12 different areas that Airbus sees as our global R&T streams. So there's 4 more that aren't so related to space, but these are also publicly available as well. And at the beginning of the year, my colleague, who's let's say the key account manager here in Australia for R&D and partnerships, who's unable to join today, but most of you would hopefully know him, Matthias Seifert. His details are at the end of the presentation. They'll be shared nevertheless. But we ran an open innovation, let's say, event over the course of a number of months, where SMEs, universities, research organizations were able to look at very clear directions from let's say the Airbus technical teams as to areas that we're looking to improve ourselves. Some of them that you see here around secure connectivity, quantum technologies. As I said, these are probably the top level wording, and also if you're interested to know more details about these or the other 4 that also aren't there, feel free to reach out, and we can start resharing that information, as it's as I said, that innovation roundtable has been closed for this year's submissions, but we also do intend to reopen that next year, just for your information. But these R&T streams, specifically around cyber and quantum, this is not something new. Airbus is investing a lot of time, effort, resources, and energy into these areas, not only for our, let's say, large secure comms business, but also around where we see quantum technology going in the future. So, you know, there is some media that came out during the week around our, let's say, our investment firm and how that money was invested locally here in Australia. So if you haven't seen that, I also encourage you to have a look, just to see some of the avenues that might be open to you. But I'll also go into them in a sec. One of the other things I also want to highlight here is just from some of the questions that have popped up in the chat that are specifically, let's say, around other areas that are not mechanical or very hardware focused. So this is also something that Airbus is interested in doing, especially when we talk about space capabilities. So our end-to-end chains, also around let's say, something that appears to be hardware focused around electrical systems of spacecraft. This is also something that is becoming more and more somehow software focused. So there's also a lot of research and development and research and tech that is going into that, that we are also, let's say, heavily involved in at the moment. And probably to conclude that, when we talk about, let's say, these other space capabilities, we're also talking about advancements and R&D that we're doing in around solar cells and electronics. And then also, Michael also mentioned the area around low Earth orbit debris. And this is also something that Airbus is becoming more focused on. One of, obviously, our, let's say, responsibilities as being a satellite integrator, launch capability at the same time. This is also something that we are very aware of and something that we are also heavily investigating. This, let's say, area of sustainability also links to sustainable fuels. So this is also an area that we're really interested, obviously investing a lot of money into that with respect to hydrogen. Maybe not so relevant in the short term for space, but nevertheless, it is still something that is probably worth mentioning here, given the, let's say, given the research objectives of not only this group, but of let's say, the Australian ecosystem as a whole. Probably one of the other things I want to highlight today is how we can help the local industry with your research and with your focus. There are a number of avenues that Airbus offers. Not only, let's say, I just had a quick look about the number of internships and PhDs that are currently being offered. So there's more than 450 internships available around Airbus offices worldwide currently that can be applied for. There's also 45 PhDs that can be done in collaboration with unis and other industries. So I also strongly encourage, if this is something that is interesting for the group today, there is some of these topics are also included in those PhDs. When we talk about how else Airbus is looking to support, let's say, developing the ecosystem here and funding the industry needs, there is also, let's say, more than 25 doctorates that are being performed at our remote sensing center of competency in Leiden in the Netherlands. And there's more than 10 postdocs there also working on remote sensing, everything from hardware all the way software, upstream, downstream, you name it, they're doing it. So there is also, and there is a lot of collaboration, especially in Leiden with respect to the Dutch community, who are also seen as very well regarded in the remote sensing industry. So this is also something that Airbus is actively looking to bring into the Australian ecosystem, and discussions around this have already been started. In terms of let's say the avenues that Airbus is interested in pursuing here in Australia, we also offer, let's say, the Airbus Ventures part of our business is run as a traditional investment firm. So if you have R&D that needs to go from TRL 1 to TRL 3 over a course of time, Airbus is interested or could be interested to go down that avenue as through our ventures business. So there is funding available there, which I think is also probably going to be interesting for the cohort here. This is mainly seed funding, let's say Series A, Series B funding. So it's not specifically tailored towards businesses, let's say business focus, but it is also, let's say, in the R&T area. In terms of, let's say, the ability to support business evolution and what we would call business growth internally, at least, Airbus Scale has, let's say, been the next iteration of what was a BizLab. So SMEs and researchers are hosted within the Airbus ecosystem. You have access to experts, or to the expert pool that we have internally, and let's say have the ability to also understand or to be exposed to not only the technical expertise, but also let's say the financial and the business expertise on the other side as well. So that's also something that we intend and kindly offer the organizations here today. And probably one of the last areas that I'll focus on here is just saying that there's also a number of opportunities based around the sort of innovative proposals that Airbus is looking to invest in that you see on the screen, that also come out of our other offices. So the focus around collaboration is something that we're very happy to continue. I think Michael also mentioned something around you know, the somewhat disconnect that exists between needing to move quickly here in Australia, sovereign capability and governments, let's say government contracts. This is also something that we can only, let's say, agree with based on the experience so far. There still are some silos, and this is something that Airbus is looking at and also trying to find a way to offer our support, especially when it comes to R&D, especially when it comes to R&D, and especially when it comes to having the opportunity to show that, let's say, individual, trying to go down the space world individually is very tough. And if Australia wants to develop its capability, whether it be sovereign or if it's also looking to import for a period of time, this is something that needs to be done collaboratively. So we're more than happy to some details are on the next slide, and I'm sure Stefan and the team will share this with you. Nevertheless, feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to have a conversation with the team. So Scott and Matthias are the key focal points here. I'm also happy to have a conversation with any of you who are looking to see how your research topics can fit into, yeah, let's say these key innovative areas that Airbus is looking to further expand on. Hopefully that answers some of the questions that were also in the chat. Hopefully it answers, let's say, the top level question of how funding can be accessed for R&D here in Australia, at least in the context of the Airbus team. If there's any other questions or comments, more than happy to take them either now or offline, depending on how we're going for time. Thanks very much.
That's great. There is a question in the chat. So Zhafeng says, hi Angela, where can we find information regarding Airbus internships and PhD scholarships, and are they open to Australian citizens?
Yeah, absolutely. So that information is found online. During the chat, I'll put the link up. There is not only, let's say, PhDs, internships, there's also, I think, 6 different graduate programs that are based, even there is one here in Australia with respect to Airbus Australia Pacific, which is mainly focused on the helicopter business, but nevertheless, once you have that appreciation, you can, this is still part of defense in the end. So it's also about working with industry and seeing how things are done. Is it open to Australian students? Absolutely. It's an international program. Anybody can apply. We'll talk, I think Stefan was talking around, you know, having very high quality students coming out of Australian universities. That is also fantastic. If everything is merit based, so as long as you're willing to learn, you'll be fine. So absolutely open to Australian students. I'm an export, or I'm an example of this. So I went through some of those programs myself, and I can only recommend. As I said, I'll put the link online. You can have a look around, but also feel free to reach out, and there you'll see that there's a number of different areas and different avenues that are being looked at for let's say this particular question.
Thanks, Angela. And Mark Casale, you've got a hand up.
Yes, thank you for that. Mark Casale from AAO at Macquarie University. I just wanted to ask you, because both you and Michael Clark have highlighted this tension between the need for sovereignty and yet existing global solutions that have had enormous investments over the years and so on. What are in terms of R&D, is there a way that groups in Australia could, for example, collaborate with existing, in your case, Airbus research groups overseas, so that, you know, the work meshes together in a much more integrated way, in a complete way, rather than isolated groups over here trying to guess what you actually need? do you foresee, is there any possible way that could happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So that happens today in terms of, let's say, the research projects that are around those 12, let's say the 12 key R&T technical areas that Airbus has, let's say, publicly said we are looking for innovative research proposals in these areas. Let's say there was 85 applications at the beginning of the year. I think we've taken the action to progress on 15 of them. Rough order of magnitude numbers, but in that, let's say, magnitude. In terms of, you know, yes, I can only agree with you, Mark, when we talk about what is it more beneficial for industry here as well, and for academia and for research to work together on a particular project? Absolutely. This is something, as I said, we already do that overseas. We're looking here for probably the last 8 or 9 months since we've really started to turn this wheel and to push it hard, where those research opportunities have access to those experts, to those research organizations overseas that we are part of. And I think the example I used before with respect to the hyperspectral industry in, let's say, more or less run out of our center of competency for such a topic in Leiden in the Netherlands is a perfect example of this. So you have organizations like TNO, which is a very large Dutch university that has been working on, for example, the Copernicus mission with ESA, with Airbus, also with Thales, with BAE. So this is where we talk about collaboration. In other parts of the world, big primes work together, yeah, and big research organizations work together. And this is something that we are looking to find a way to establish here. So absolutely, when it comes to research, this is something that we are more than happy to have that conversation with. If it's something that is based here, fantastic. There's a lot of work being done out of SmartSat CRC as well. If it's something that is where there's an already existing research topic being done overseas, there is no reason why Australian research and Australian expertise can't participate. Absolutely.
Right. Thanks, Angelo. And I think that message about partnering and teaming up is sort of what's at the core of the New South Wales state strategy with these networks. So I think it resonates with what we're trying to achieve. That's great.
Yeah,
Okay,
maybe just to reiterate that, I would wholly endorse what Angelo has said. There are significant opportunities. And for example, Thales today is doing a research activity with the University of Western Australia on free space optical communications. And that is closely linked to a global commercialization opportunity that Thales has in terms of using that technology to upgrade a product within a global product portfolio. So that's a great example. And we do that work with monthly meetings with people in Europe directly involved in that activity. So it's an example of what can be done if we coordinate things and target a global market.
Good. So our next presentation is actually from Space Machines, and Space Machines is deeply embedded, I guess, at UTS in their tech lab, and I think doing some really exciting things. I don't know if Raj, we want to introduce Raj, but Raj, you're up next.
I think we can just move right into Raj if you're there and ready. Looks like you are.
Can you guys hear me well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So Space Machines is an Australian startup, and I think what I wanted to do was just give you guys an idea of what we are working on and some of the areas on the technology side that are relevant to what we're doing. So rather than take maybe a more broader approach, but really focus on what we're doing and how that might relate to research that might be useful in the next 12, 18 months in a real, I guess, mission. And so a bit of background, Space Machines is a 2.5-year-old Australian startup. We are building a space logistics product in form of an orbital transfer vehicle. It's a vehicle that allows rideshare on most major launchers, allowing multiple customers to be deployed at the same time. And so the real go-to markets, and I think some of the earlier speakers spoke about this, that we see is obviously first one being transport, How do we effectively deploy and precisely place satellites in their right orbits in LEO and higher orbits. Also a hosted platform for customers who don't necessarily want to build their own satellites, but want to take advantage of a hosted platform that allows them to either test or deploy their sensors. 3, orbit side assistance, which is a go-to-market from our end, focusing on servicing. So things like debris management, life extension, and a bunch of other on-orbit servicing solutions. And finally, I think the one that sort of excites us the most is the idea of an exploration as a service, where traditionally exploration missions have cost a lot and taken a long time. How do we create high cadence, low cost, maybe a single instrument platform for doing science? And so I think from my perspective, those are the 4 areas that we're focusing on as we build a vehicle. And as you see, it's about a 300 kilo payload mass vehicle. It itself weighs about 200 kilos. So in total, fully loaded, it's about 500 kilos. It's compatible with most rideshare launch configurations for major launchers out there. Stefan, if you could go to the next slide. So some of the areas that we're currently working on that might be relevant, and I thought it'd be interesting to put that up on the screen. From a propulsion point of view, we're working on a small liquid methane, liquid oxygen cryogenic engine and turbopump. And I think that, that's happening now in Sydney. And our focus is, less than 5 kilonewton thrust engines, which has not been done before, because it gets very interesting as you start to go smaller in size with cryogenic engines. We're also looking at liquid methane and LOX RCS thrusters. That's another area that we're working on. And obviously, alongside that, how do you do cryogenic feed management at such scale? So from a propulsion point of view, those are the 3 areas that we're currently researching and developing in-house tech, but also looking for people to help. Again, the other one that we came across was there's a lot of off-the-shelf components for CubeSats out there, but for satellites between 50 and 500 kilos, ADCS components are really expensive with long lead times. So when we start to look at magnet torquers or reaction wheels and just the ADCS system components, there's not a lot of choices out there, especially when we want a commercial off-the-shelf product. So that's an area for us that's really interesting. Separation system, this is something that we've been designing for the last 1.5 years in-house. We're going to be testing it very soon. It's 8-inch, 15 and 24-inch versions of separation systems that are going to be compatible with most rideshare ports out there, both for European and North American rockets. We've been doing some work on the onboard computer and really starting to look at some of the FPGA-based onboard computer technologies to help drive more advanced use cases. Things like docking and rendezvous, and how do you start to build a scalable product over the next 24, 36 months. On the software side, the team's really focused at the moment. We're using NASA's CFS software for flight and really looking to get help around porting that to a more modern language like Rust. So that's a very specific example of some of the things that we're working on. Again, I know Jason talked about a lot. Some of the interesting things that we're starting to think about is, how do you actually conduct multiple mission operations with multiple of these vehicles in orbit, deploying multiple customers? It gets exponentially complex very quickly. So what are some of the things, both from a sensing side, but also from control point of view, when you think about? And then finally on structures, how do you really look at a modular structural bus that allows missions both for low Earth orbit and above with minimum amount of delays? So there's some of the, I guess, indicative areas of things that we're working on. And I thought I'd leave you guys with that as far as some of the interesting projects that we may have going on at the moment and in areas that we may be interested to collaborate on.
Thanks, Raj. Very much appreciated. It's great to get a variety of perspectives on sort of the challenges that people are facing and research opportunities. Thanks for that. Very much appreciated. Any questions for Raj? No?
So I'm happy to ask a question while people are thinking.
Yeah.
Sometimes that helps
Yeah, go ahead.
helps people to do that. So Raj, I know you and I have talked at length about some of these ideas, but maybe for the benefit of the kind of community, you know, how do you envision something like the Space Research Network helping you as a business?
Yeah, look, I think for as a startup, I think agility and responsiveness is key. So I think for us, it's looking at how do we engage on fast, high cadence projects that allow us to move quickly from a concept into a product that we could flight rate, for example. So I think maybe even small scoped but very targeted projects that allow us to move technologies up the TRL levels. So I think that's the way we look at it. I think from my personal perspective, I think having an approach of where, for example, is there a star tracker available that we could use in the next 12 to 18 months, and what will that take to work on, and how do we collaborate with people who might be interested in working on that? So given we're a startup, our line of sight is 12 to 18 months, maybe 24 months. So I think for us that timeline is key in terms of the way we see outcomes from something like this.
That's great. Thanks very much. There's a question from Tim and Joanna from Optus. Is Rust a popular language in the space industry?
I think it's not, but I think there's an increasing interest in the language. I know there is a couple of groups in Europe starting to work on coming out of the automotive area, starting to look at applying Rust into space applications. And so there is a effort called the Ferris Systems out of Germany that's starting to look at standardizing some of the Rust applications for aerospace industry. So it's really been driven by the adoption in the automotive sector.
Thanks, Raj. Okay, moving on. Our next speaker is James Pryor from EOS. He's going to be talking to us about the communications superhighway for the space economy. James had been having a few audio issues, but I think they're resolved.
Yes, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Great, excellent. Off to a flying start then. So while the graphic here talks about SpaceLink, I'll just give you some background as to what it all is about. I work for EOS Electro-Optic Systems, been around for about 35 years. Initially commenced work in ground-based laser ranging for space debris tracking and spacecraft tracking. That then evolved into defence applications, utilising the optical heritage, combine that with gimbal systems to create what's called a remote weapon system for defence. And then that's evolved further into the communication opportunities that I'm going to talk about now. So what's interesting about SpaceLink is that it's actually an Australian-based company, because we're on the ASX, sovereign Australian company, that's been able to acquire a startup in the US that was going through some difficulties, and we've brought in some experts to head that new business and turn it into what is now SpaceLink. So SpaceLink is looking at developing a MEO constellation, so initially 4 spacecraft in the MEO orbit, about 14,000 Ks up, to do optical data relay from low Earth orbit satellites, especially satellites like Earth observation spacecraft that have a requirement for large quantities of data. You can transfer that data through optical links from the LEO orbit to the MEO and back down to Earth in real time. And now, up until recently, that's just been a nice idea, lots of PowerPoint presentations. But just in the last few weeks, we've managed to raise enough investment to actually kick off the process. And so we've raised $300 million, US that is, to commence the manufacture of the first 4 spacecraft. That's being done by OHB. Each spacecraft about 700 kilos, and they're due to be launched around the sort of the 2024 timeframe. So this is a pretty big deal because it's this is an Australian-led capability, and what it's also enabling us to do is to look at, all right, well, if they're being built overseas, is there an option to potentially build them locally? What sorts of expertise would we need in Australia to be able to do that? And that's I guess where we're finding ourselves tapping into the university research and academic parts of the Australian sector, because we do see that space missions are certainly complex systems of systems, and we are looking at the niche sort of capabilities that we can grow and foster locally here. And I guess that's sort of a key focus right now for us is sort of understanding who's out there and what can we do with the goal of focusing on this sort of core capability that's within EOS. So that's around the optical instrument side, optical free space or free space optics, and general sort of communication opportunities that exist today. I guess just some other, while this slide's up, SpaceLink, yes, I think I've covered most of those points. You can see there's already a demand, 200 customers in the pipeline. So so far, it's looking very, very positive, which is great to see. Maybe you can go to the next slide, which talks about why. Some of the previous speakers have certainly talked about the rapid expansion of spacecraft in orbit, and so by 2030, we're looking at 50,000 plus spacecraft in orbit. RF spectrum allocation is getting tricky. Quantity of data is increasing. Offboarding that data in real time is becoming a challenge. So we do feel that the SpaceLink capability is a niche opportunity that we can excel at, and the market looks right for future growth. The next slide. Again, I think I've covered most of these. Having the ability to offload data in real time, I believe is a bit of a game changer. My background is through Airbus as well. Worked in Airbus for quite a while in their geospatial division with the Pleiades and the Spot satellites. And so I'm very much aware of the requirement to get data off board in real time, if at all possible, for applications like maritime surveillance, for fire monitoring, for those sorts of applications. Having real time data access is quite valuable, and our goal is to achieve that. And so I think our journey is as an Australian company, we do see in Australia that we've got two ends of the spectrum. We've got you've got the startups which are doing some amazing things, developing some really key capabilities in niche markets that are exciting to see. At the other end of the spectrum, we've had the Thalases and the Airbus, and they've certainly got their role to play in Australia as well. And the ability to tap into those networks, I think, is very valuable. But in the middle, there's not much in Australia, and that's where EOS is really positioning itself to play in that middle ground. So, sovereign Australian company, about 500 people, with a unique capability, and then looking at how we can tap into the research sector. But it goes further because we're also looking at just ourselves. We don't have the ability to do everything just by ourselves. And so we're also looking at partnerships, and that's so we have a strong connection with Nova Systems, and then we are also looking at other SMEs that we can put into the fold that can really help pad out, I guess, our overall capability within Australia. And so that's kind of a bit of an overview as to EOS and this SpaceLink mission that we're actively developing as we speak, and I think it's going to certainly lead to I believe a lot of opportunities for research, whether that's PhD subjects, new courses. It can be everything from even space trades to exquisite astrodynamics. You name it. I think there's going to be some interesting opportunities on the horizon. So that's it from EOS and SpaceLink.
Perfect. Thanks, James. That's great. Yeah. Do we have any questions for James? I see Sarah's posted a question. I think this is sort of broadly a broad question for everyone, but what skill sets are industries finding it difficult to recruit for in the space industry? What are things that are kind of missing or difficult to come across?
I guess while I've got the mic, you know, there's a number of new courses where you can start to get the appropriate training for space. The space expertise that's required, whether that's electrical engineering or software engineering, and you can start to focus, I guess, your understanding on future space opportunities. Where there's a gap is in that 3, 5, 10-year experience horizon. I mean, if you can find people that have that level of experience, have worked on missions in the past, that's where it's tough. There's a few, coming back to Australia, and I think the more of these sort of large opportunities that we have, the more the space agency and defence start pointing towards future larger missions. I think the greater chance we'll have of enticing some of these people back to Australia, both Australians, but also just other international people who view Australia as a nice place to live and work.
All right, thanks, James. Jason, I saw you kind of popped up in my screen. Did you have a response or?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think James hit the nail on the head. We've got a lot on the market for junior engineers. Although we've got more companies that need junior engineers, and the quality of Australian space engineers coming out of unis, I actually think are quite good for brand new engineers coming out of uni, knowing the basics. But that 5-year mid-career to 5 to 10-year kind of mid-career space professional, that's what we got to build our way into. I completely agree with James on that one.
And we'd like to have time at the end to ask these broad questions of this, all speakers as a panel. This sounds like a good one to kick that off.
Yeah. Okay, our final presentation that we had set up was Phil from QuasarSat. I know Phil had a duck out for a minute. Phil, are you online?
So Phil couldn't make it. I'm Richard Ellerman. I'm the head of development in Quasar. So I'll be giving a small presentation. He's basically just given me one slide to talk about.
You want to share your screen?
I will share my screen.
Okay. Let's go.
See if I can find the slide. Now it's not coming up, unfortunately, so I'll just, that's me. So I'm just going to have to share my whole screen. So you should see, and now it's telling me that I need to set something up. 1 sec. It's telling me that I can't share the screen until I quit the thing. So I'm just going to have to leave and come back. 1 sec.
So I guess while we're taking a brief pause, maybe we can just talk quickly about what we'll do after this. We still have a few minutes left. The intention was to really open questions to the set of speakers as a panel, and really anybody would like to join the discussion. And I think that the question about education and training is a good one. Please prepare a few for the group as we go through the final presentation.
While we wait for QuasarSat, I did have one more speaker who I've invited to say a couple of words. So we might do that now. So Tim Parsons is, I'm just trying to share screen here. Tim Parsons is the chair of the New South Wales node of the SmartSet CRC, and also he's on the board of the Space Industry Association of Australia, amongst I suspect many other hats. But Tim, if you want to say a few words, while I get the screen share organized.
Hi, everybody. What a fantastic turnout. I even had a question for the panelists just there, but yeah, it's terrific to be here. I have some slides. I thought I might just real quick go through, Stefan, unless you've done that for me.
Yeah,
fantastic.
You should be able to see that now.
I promise there'll be only a couple. If you just jump ahead. So SmartSet CRC, I'm sure most of you know, this is the SmartSet CRC focus area nationally. So one of the ways to think about SmartSet CRC is that it's come out of its startup phase. It's now in a scale-up phase. You know, it's done a bunch of early projects, which you'll be able to see all the details of on the SmartSet CRC website. And it's also focused in a whole lot of these areas, these three core areas: advanced satellite system sensors and intelligence, next-gen Earth observation data, and advanced communications, connectivity, and IoT. And we've been able to squeeze quite a lot of stuff into those criteria. And in the top right there, you can see three big kind of missions that we're also working on: Aqua Watch with CSIRO, disaster resilience, which is a project we now call Eye in the Sky, and the Indo-Pacific Connector, which is a defense-related project. And as the SmartSets become kind of more confident and has been rolling faster, we're really trying to take out friction from the process. So all the contracts, for example, are about to go to a short form. We're working quite hard on some standard IP at that larger scale. And then just jumping to the next slide, so specifically around the New South Wales node. So New South Wales node is co-funded by New South Wales government, and we have a little bit of broader remit than the core SmartSet CRC kind of projects, but and perhaps slightly more kind of lower TRL, but enabling higher TRL than the SmartSet projects, but smaller kind of MVP focus. Demonstrator projects are currently up to 100K, with 66% of that funded. We're hoping over the next 12 months or so that we may push that to a larger amount. We had 5 proposals received so far. 4 were funded, many of you involved, some of those folks funded in the audience, I can see. And the next rounds are now continuous. So what you'll see on the SmartSet CRC website, there's a New South Wales node page. There's an application form for you to do a demonstrator project application anytime. And if you see a good reason to breach that 100K ceiling, I'm all ears. We're interested in the quality of the projects rather than ticking that box. The mobility program's just been announced, as has the infrastructure program. So mobility program is talent both ways. So if you have some person who is in R&D, you'd like to bring them into your firm, or if there's somebody in your firm, you want to place them in an R&D organization, we will cover 100% of that, no co-contribution required, up to 6 months. And infrastructure, similarly, it's about access by industry partners to R&D infrastructure. So all of our industry, all of our R&D partners are here. Pretty much done a fantastic job coming into the network. So the SmartSet CRC node can fund 100% of your time on equipment and with the technicians in the university if you're somebody who wants to test something. So we're really trying to lower the barrier and open your kind of creative potential. Next slide, please, Stefan. And the way that we've been doing this is sort of actively matching R&D industry, end users, and government. The way that we did this last year, we worked with Andrew Dempster's team at UNSW, where the AXA team were running the CubeSat workshop, and we did a morning session. Many of you were in that morning session where we did a design matching exercise. The thing that we did was get R&D folks to interview industry folks, and literally all of our project proposals came out of that one workshop. So we plan to do some more of this design approach. The questions that our R&D teams ask industry is just a terrific way to reveal their capability, and we're keen to for even more ambitious kind of projects. Next slide, please, Stefan. Thank you. Another thing that we're connected to is the Aurora network that SmartSet has set up. The first major project call we did for this, for all of our early stage space companies nationally, is the Aurora Distributed Flight Sat. And I'm proud to say that UNSW, again, UNSW at AXA, is hosting the bus. And there's an EOI process right now that's completed, and that now that the team has been interviewing all the EOI participants for requirements, and they're about to start to build out some hardware, a private VPN, and some other things that we can use to explore ways to allow that real quick interconnect interoperability and lower the number of payloads that might arrive at a rideshare mission or come to an integration stage and be dead on arrival because of a software or hardware integration issue. And it's a classic industry thing. Number of industry partners do this, but we're interested in figuring out how we can drive that interoperability standards forward. Next slide, please, Stefan. We have some other things that we've learned from our roughly 30 plus members growing at about 2 a week. They would like a common IP framework. I think we've had folks say, if it's too hard to buy from each other because the IP is so complicated, we'll just go overseas. So we're working on a project next year to develop, essentially like a safe note or a Y Combinator, for early stage investing. We're interested in doing something for IP as well as a partnership agreement that goes with that, so that we can, again, lower the friction of people needing, who could come together in a project and create a better starting point. And we're also interested in flight opportunities. I'm personally involved with Jason and Eva Cairns and many others on this call in the Waratah Seed mission, which is co-funded by the New South Wales government. So we're keen for SmartSat CRC Aurora to also fly payloads on that mission, commercial payloads, and we're looking for other flight opportunities. And I think there's also, there's also commercial opportunities globally, I think, to start getting more engineers and more business teams flown, and to take up more of those Australian mission control slots that we need to do. We need that flight heritage as Australians. Next slide, please. So those are my contact details. Thanks so much for having me today. And I'll probably finish with saying we're really actively keen to collaborate with the Space Research Network, both programs, the SmartSat CRC New South Wales Node and Space Research Network, Waratah Seed, National Space Industry Hub. They're all co-funded by New South Wales government. So, we're working together to make sure we can create the best opportunities for New South Wales companies and companies based around Australia to work with New South Wales companies and universities in next gen stuff. How was that?
Fantastic. Thanks, Tim. Really appreciate that. And just note that you chaired an interesting session at last week's Southern Space Symposium on sort of the future of space, and we probably won't have time to sort of re-prosecute that, but it's really great to hear all the things and the thinking of sort of what the future of the sector looks like. So I'm conscious we're running up against time, and I think we had one more. Richard was going to give us a bit of a talk about QuasarSat. It's the ground station early startup coming out of CSIRO. And if you're able to share.
Yes, thanks for that. Sorry about that. I'm back again now, so I will share my screen. Okay. So you should be able to see a presentation slide. Yes. QuasarSat. I can't actually see that, so I'm just hoping you can see it. So this slide really is Quasar in a nutshell. It tells you what we are and what we're doing and where we're going. So Quasar is a fairly new startup. I've only been in Quasar for about 4 months now, and Quasar itself has been around for maybe 8 months, thereabouts. We started development on a ground station as a service platform roughly 2 months ago, so we're very brand new. So what we are is intending to be a ground station as a service for both commercial use and also for non-commercial use, for defense use, for example. We're a sovereign service. Now that means that we're spinning up in Australia and we're building an MVP in Australia. We haven't really located the site for that yet, but we are intending to build a few sites within Australia, and we're also intending to build some global sites that are managed as sovereign sites via Australia. So that one of the things that Michael Clark brought up was the need for sovereign ground station services. So that's sort of ringing a bell with me. We're really looking primarily at ground station as a service, but we are also looking at space domain awareness and SSA applications, because one of the things that we're building Quasar on is technology that was developed through CSIRO. You can see a little picture down on the left side there, the left bottom there, of an engineer that's developing a phased array. So our ground station as a service platform is largely built initially from this technology that was delivered from CSIRO. So that phased array that the engineer is working on is a cryo-PAF phased array. That means that it's cryogenically cooled. The little elements, each of those little elements have a cooling system at the back of them that cools them down to very low temperatures, and it gives the low noise amplifiers behind those antennas extremely high gain compared to a traditional antenna, and that means that we don't need a dish basically. So there's enough gain in that space that you see on that antenna to give us the equivalent gain of roughly a 5-meter dish. So our technology is initially built upon that, and we're expanding it later on, presumably to support things like optical communications and just traditional issues as well. So that's largely what we're building our platform on. It's a purely digital platform, so the only RF elements on our entire platform will be literally behind those antennas. Everything else is digital. So that entire antenna array, they will be sitting somewhere near the ground station, and there'll be a digital fiber feed running from that, running into our ground station. And all of the processing that we do, really it's entirely digital. So we route traffic, we route RF into the ground station, and we route potentially RF out of the ground station into services needed by customers or defense. So why do we exist? Well, that's been covered quite extensively over the course of this conversation. There's a lot of satellites going up into orbit. The slide here suggests 57,000, but more recent estimates are putting that around 100,000 satellites over the course of the next 7 or so years. So there's a very large need for ground station services at the moment. We've chosen to use ground station as a service model because that's where we see the future for ground station as a service. So rather than leasing particular antenna time off us, we just lease minutes of time. Now, because we're using phased array technology, we don't have the limitation of antenna slewing. So we can run several beams concurrently with the same antenna. And for our MVP, we're going to be demoing roughly 3 concurrent beams in different orbits. But at the end of the development, we're expecting to run about 100 beams concurrently. Why do we do this in terms of phased arrays rather than traditional antennas? Now, obviously, the phased arrays are more expensive to build initially, but the operational costs are significantly lower than traditional antennas. Plus, we also get the benefit, of course, of concurrency on beamforming. Now, as I said, the ground station services are entirely digital. So that means that when we run out of capacity at a given time, so let's say we build our capacity for 100 concurrent beams, if we need to extend that capacity, we don't really need to expand the antenna array hardware. All we really need to do is expand the digital hardware in order to support more capacity. So that's also one of the benefits that we've got. Now, the antennas that we're building at the moment are S-band antennas. They're receive antennas at the moment. We're working on building transmit antennas for S-band, and then we're moving on to different bands. We're also looking at dual band antennas. We have a lot of help from CSIRO in terms of developing more tech. At the moment, CSIRO is holding a lot of the knowledge around this hardware, and we'll be transitioning all of that knowledge in over the course of the next 12 months into Quasar. We obviously have things like manufacturing issues that we need to look at, particularly with higher bands, because we don't know if the materials that are used on S-band will be suitable for higher bands, such as X-band and K-bands. So we're looking into that. We currently have an intern working with us who's looking at the SSA applications. So we'll be expanding, hopefully, that SSA area, and that's where we're looking for more interns. And I think that's one of the areas that we're hoping to get some more people from this program as well.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I think we have to unfortunately call time. It's over the time frame we announced. I see people are needing to drop off. Fascinating technology, and I'm sure people would like to hear more about it. For people who are happy to stay for a few more minutes, I think we can stay and keep it going. For as long as people like. I would like to start to open up questions to the panel, questions to Richard, more about Quasar included. So do we have anyone who'd like to kick that off? I have a standing question about education and training that people can from the panel might choose to comment on.
It's Michael Clark here from Thales. Question for Richard. Your presentation seems to focus on the technology that you've derived from CSIRO and the use of that in terms of the communications capability. Have you thought of focusing on that and teaming with other partners like Sabre Astronautics, who have a resilient space operations center or responsive space operations center already in place, and are looking for partners to provide the connectivity they need? So have you thought about that sort of partnering relationships?
So Quasar is actually built from several partners, and Sabre is one of those partners.
On board. Excellent.
We have a number of partners that deliver different benefits to Quasar. We have Fleet, for example, who deliver ground station services themselves, and they're working with us in terms of getting us as one of their ground station pieces or components. And Sabre's looking at us for ground station services as part of their ecosystem. And we have other partners as well. CSIRO is obviously our biggest partner. They're doing most of the development. Yes, we're always looking for partners. And when your presentation came up, my first response was sending out a message to our product team manager saying, get in touch with Michael Clark, because he's saying exactly the same stuff as we're saying internally as well. So hopefully you'll get in contact from somebody called Rashmi.
Okay, thank you.
It's good feedback. I guess we're open to some more questions, but I just want to, emphasize that I think, from our perspective at least, it's a very exciting moment in the Australian space sector. Lots of opportunity, lots of investment, lots of potential, and we're certainly hoping that the SRN can help build and support collaboration and coordination between government, industry, and research organizations. And that some of these grand challenges that we've heard about will help drive innovation and future development. And of course, I'd also like to acknowledge the support of the New South Wales State Government in helping us set up this network, and really look forward to working with you all moving forward. Any last comments or questions? Any feedback for the panel? Yeah, Tim?
Yeah, hey, Tim from Optus. More of a comment than a question, and just sort of to the collective, I just thought it was a good time to sort of bring it up. I sort of alluded to it with a question earlier about focusing on software, and it is good to hear that there will be some focus on that. But as a space operator, it's for large commercial geos, we're pretty unlikely to suddenly start buying Australian-made reaction wheels out of some precinct in Sydney, as great as they might be, just because we're in a different part of the market. But I think in the software space, that's something. Obviously, Sabre is a great demonstrator of this kind of pathway, but building software, it's very scalable. You can sell it globally, and we run numerous software products. We do orbits, we do payload, particularly communications payload management. obviously flying the spacecraft itself, space domain awareness and situational awareness, and even just network and cybersecurity. It takes a lot of different software products to fly satellites. And unlike a satellite, which takes years to procure and years of flying, we could switch a software product in 3 months if there was a better product out there that was either cheaper or had more capability. So I just think that's something where Australians could really really find their place in the global industry and scale it really well. And something that should really just be like encouraged in terms of the kind of industry nights that people like us show up to. It shouldn't just be the mechatronic and aerospace engineers. We should be, talking to IT and computer science and software engineers to really get them interested in the game and get some innovation out of those guys as well. If people know the right people to talk to do that kind of thing.
Thanks. And just to note, Tim's from Optus, so if I guess anybody wants to reach out, I guess we can provide some contact details perhaps. I do agree, and I think one of the things we'd really like to think about is how we expand the opportunities for companies that are maybe adjacent to the space sector, who maybe haven't worked in that area before. I know one of the Australian Space Agency exploration grants was awarded to a company that mainly does marine robotics that came out of Sydney Uni as a collaboration. So they're starting to think about space as a potential area to move into. I think also there's a lot of people doing software and machine learning, that could really be brought to bear in this area. So I think plenty of opportunity, and as you said, it's not all about hardware and satellites. It's sort of the full range of activities that we'd like to support. Any other comments or feedback? We had a cursor that looked like somebody had their hand up.
So,
all right, I guess
I did have one comment.
Yeah,
and this was relating to a question that was on the chat list, and it was about how do we find staff, and honestly, it's very difficult. We're really looking for staff in the tech, just standard tech, and we're also looking for staff in RF and electronic engineering and things like this. But I have to say, it's very difficult to find staff in Australia. So it's a never-ending fight. I'm sure that others are finding the same thing.
Yeah, and I suspect that the border closures and things like that has probably been exacerbating the problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's certainly an area that's an area of focus for the network. As an organization that includes both the top universities, I would say, representing all of New South Wales, plus industry, then this is the place to house kind of the seeds of initiatives to help alleviate that problem, and that's one of our goals.
And we want to make sure that the universities are providing services and training that are responsive to the needs of the community. If you can help us shape those programs, and that'd be certainly very much appreciated. And I also wanted to flag that we asked half a dozen speakers today, but that's certainly not an exhaustive list of people working in this sector. And there's a huge amount of other opportunity that we haven't covered today, and we'd certainly welcome input and collaboration with a broad range of partners. It's certainly not exclusive to those who've spoken today, and we certainly look forward to receiving submissions, and we'll certainly work with Tim and coordinate some of our SmartSat CRC approach and some of the programs that they're running. But thanks everyone for your time. Really appreciate it, and look forward to working with everyone to make this network a success.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.